When a narcissist realizes they can no longer control you, something fundamental shifts in their psyche. You have to understand that control isn't just something they desire, it's the very foundation of their identity. Their sense of self is fragile, built upon an illusion of superiority and dominance. When that illusion is challenged, their entire psychological framework starts to crack. At first, they won't believe it. The narcissist's initial response is denial, not just outwardly, but internally. They've spent so much time cultivating an image of being untouchable, always in charge, always the one dictating the terms of reality. They see themselves as masters of influence, capable of bending people's emotions and perceptions to their will. When you start to slip out of their grasp, they don't immediately panic. Instead, they rationalize it. They tell themselves that you're just acting out, that you'll come crawling back once you see how much you need them. They assume this is temporary because in their mind, no one ever truly escapes them. But then, something changes. You don't react the way you used to. You don't engage in the arguments, the guilt tripping, the emotional bait they throw at you. They start to feel it, their grip loosening. And that's when panic begins to set in. For the narcissist, losing control over someone is more than just an inconvenience. It's an existential threat. Their entire worldview is built on the ability to manipulate others into validating their false self. They don't possess a stable, well-defined identity of their own. Instead, they depend on the reactions of those around them to construct a sense of superiority. When you refuse to play the game, you're doing more than just defying them. You're stripping them of the psychological fuel they need to survive. At this stage, their mind races. How did this happen? Where did they miscalculate? They might even convince themselves that you've been influenced by someone else, some enemy who has poisoned you against them. Because in their world, the idea that you've simply grown stronger on your own is unthinkable. They don't acknowledge the autonomy of others. They only see pawns and threats. If you're no longer under their control, you must have been manipulated by someone else. And this, in turn, fuels their paranoia. You'll notice a shift in their behavior. There will be moments of desperation masked as confidence. They might oscillate between acting as if they don't care and making grand theatrical attempts to reclaim their influence over you. They might lash out with sudden cruelty, saying things designed to cut deep, to shake your sense of self-worth, because they need to see if you still flinch. If they can still wound you, it means they still have a foothold in your psyche. But if you stand firm, if you meet their aggression with indifference, if you remain unmoved in the face of their provocations, you'll see something remarkable. The mask starts to slip. The false bravado fades, replaced by something raw and unsettling. Fear. The narcissist, despite their inflated self-image, is deeply afraid. Afraid of being powerless. Afraid of being exposed. Afraid of facing themselves without someone else to reflect back an image of control. And here's the moment of truth. When a narcissist truly realizes they've lost control over you, they face a choice. They can either escalate, becoming more erratic, more aggressive, more desperate in their attempts to regain dominance, or they can retreat, disappearing from your life entirely in search of an easier target. Either way, you've won. Because the moment they panic, the moment their confidence falters, they reveal the truth they've been trying to hide all along. They were never as powerful as they pretended to be. Their control over you was always an illusion, dependent on your willingness to play the role they assigned to you. When you step out of that role, when you refuse to engage, you force them to confront the fact that they are not in control. Not of you, and not of themselves. And that is the moment of reckoning. That is the moment they realize they have nothing left. So, the question is, when that moment comes, will you be ready? Will you recognize it for what it is and stand firm, refusing to be pulled back in? Because once a narcissist knows they can't control you, they will do everything in their power to make you doubt yourself. But if you hold the line, if you refuse to flinch, then you've already won. The only thing left to do is walk away without looking back. When a narcissist realizes they can no longer control you, their next instinct is to reclaim dominance by any means necessary. This isn't a conscious strategy necessarily. It's a deep-seated compulsion, a desperate attempt to restore the imbalance that once worked in their favor. Their entire psychological framework depends on control, and when that control is threatened, they respond with a combination of manipulation, intimidation, and at times, outright destruction. One of the first things you'll notice is their attempt to rewrite the narrative. A narcissist cannot tolerate the idea that they have lost power over you. So they begin constructing an alternate version of reality, one in which they are still the dominant force. This could manifest in several ways. Maybe they start portraying you as unstable, ungrateful, or irrational. They might spread rumors subtly or overtly, suggesting that you were the problem all along. If they can't control you directly, they will try to control how others perceive you. And that is no accident. A narcissist's power doesn't just come from their ability to manipulate you, it comes from their ability to shape the world around you. They understand at an instinctive level that perception is reality for most people. If they can't keep you under their control, they can at least make sure that you don't emerge from the situation unscathed. They do this not only to punish you, but to reinforce their own delusions. If they can convince others that you're weak, broken, or at fault, then they don't have to face the uncomfortable truth that they were never as powerful as they pretended to be. This is where your strength is tested. The moment a narcissist sees that you are no longer playing the role they assigned to you, they will attempt to provoke you into reacting emotionally. If they can make you lash out, if they can make you defend yourself in a frantic, desperate way, then they regain some level of control. They can point at your reaction and say, see, I told you they were unstable. They want to pull you back into the game because as long as you're playing, even in anger or self-defense, they still have influence over you. But the real test is whether you recognize this for what it is. The only way to truly win against a narcissist is to step outside of their frame completely. Do not engage in the argument. Do not try to explain yourself. Do not seek validation. The more you try to convince them, or anyone they've turned against you, that you are not what they claim, the deeper you sink into their web. The truth is, people who genuinely know you will not be fooled. And those who are easily manipulated by the narcissist were never truly in your corner to begin with. There's something incredibly powerful about refusing to participate in someone else's delusion. When you stand firm in your reality, when you refuse to react with the desperation they expect, you expose the narcissist's power for what it really is, hollow, dependent on deception and coercion rather than any real authority. And here's the part that's hardest for them to accept. When they can no longer control you, they start losing control of themselves. Their entire self-emission depends on being able to influence others, and when that ability slips away, they experience something close to an identity crisis. They may lash out in increasingly erratic ways, trying to get any kind of response from you. Anger, fear, sadness, even guilt. Because to them, even a negative reaction is better than nothing. Nothingness is the one thing a narcissist cannot tolerate. So they escalate, they might alternate between cruelty and false kindness, between threats and love bombing. One moment they may try to paint themselves as the victim, saying you abandoned them, that you misunderstood their intentions. The next moment they may resort to outright intimidation, making veiled threats, implying that you'll regret cutting them off. It's a last-ditch effort to see if they can still get inside your head, if they can still trigger the emotions that once kept you trapped. But here's the key. You are no longer that person. The version of you they once controlled no longer exists, and that terrifies them. The greatest mistake you could make in this moment is underestimating the lengths they will go to in order to reclaim control. This isn't just about personal ego. This is about their very survival. The narcissist needs people to control in the same way a parasite needs a host. Without that source of psychological sustenance, they wither. And they will do anything to avoid that fate. This is why they burn bridges so spectacularly. If they cannot reclaim power over you, they will do their best to destroy any sense of peace you have left. They will attempt to poison your relationships, damage your reputation, undermine your confidence. Because if they can't own you, they want to ensure that no one else will either. It's an act of pure destruction, one that stems from the profound emptiness inside them. But you don't have to let them succeed. The antidote to this kind of manipulation is clarity. Clarity in who you are, clarity in what is true, clarity in what you will and will not tolerate. A narcissist's greatest weapon is confusion. if they can keep you doubting yourself, if they can keep you emotionally tangled in their chaos, they maintain a kind of indirect control. But if you refuse to be drawn in, if you remain steadfast in your understanding of reality, then their tactics fail. And this is the moment they fear most. The moment when you see them for what they truly are, and you walk away unshaken, unbroken, and utterly free. When a narcissist realizes they can no longer control you, their behavior doesn't simply stop, it transforms. It shifts into something more desperate, more erratic, and often more destructive. This is the stage where they resort to one of their most insidious tactics, playing the victim. Now you might wonder why. Why would someone who has spent so much time inflating their own importance suddenly switch roles and present themselves as the wounded, the wronged, the misunderstood? The answer is simple: control. If they can't dominate you through direct manipulation, then they will attempt to do so by rewriting the story. And in this new version of reality, they are not the aggressor, but the one who has been deeply unfairly hurt. This shift is crucial to understand because it's not just about deception, it's about survival. Narcissists do not possess the internal mechanisms necessary to accept personal failure, to acknowledge fault, or to take genuine responsibility. To do so would unravel the fragile sense of self they've constructed. And so when they lose control of you, they cannot see it as a reflection of their own shortcomings. It must be externalized. It must be someone else's fault. And that someone is you. So what do? First, they create a new narrative, one that paints you as cruel, disloyal, or even abusive. This isn't done in isolation. A narcissist needs an audience, a set of sympathetic ears to absorb and validate their version of events. They may go to mutual friends, family members, or colleagues, seeding carefully crafted half-truths and outright fabrications. I don't know what happened, they'll say. I gave everything and they just turned on me. Notice the structure of these statements. They are always vague enough to invite speculation, always emotionally charged enough to elicit sympathy, and always designed to make you look like the villain. This is not an accident. The narcissist understands, perhaps better than most, that perception shapes reality. If they can convince enough people that they are the victim, then in a way they are. And here's where it gets even more dangerous. Because if you react, if you try to correct the record, if you try to defend yourself, if you try to explain the truth, you walk straight into their trap. You see, they are counting on you to do just that. They need you to fight back, because in doing so, you validate the drama they've created. You give them more material to twist, more ammunition to use against you. So what's the alternative? The alternative is to refuse to participate in their false reality. You do not defend yourself against lies that were never intended to be fair. You do not engage in a battle that was designed from the outset to exhaust and entangle you. You do not waste your energy trying to dismantle an illusion, because an illusion, once ignored, eventually collapses under its own weight. This is where true strength comes in. Walking away from a narcissist's false narrative takes immense discipline. It requires you to accept that some people will believe things about you that are not true. That is a hard pill to swallow. But the alternative, staying locked in their game, constantly reacting to their provocations, is far worse. Because the moment you start defending yourself against their accusations, you accept their premise. And that's exactly what they want. Now, here's something else to consider. The Narcissist Victim Act is not just about controlling the narrative. It's also about testing you. They want to see if they can still make you feel guilty, if they can make you second-guess yourself, if they can make you hesitate in your decision to walk away. They will say things designed to trigger your empathy. Phrases like, I don't know what I did to deserve this, or I guess I was never good enough for you. These words are calculated. They are meant to exploit your compassion, to make you feel like maybe, just maybe, you're in the wrong. But you are not in the wrong. You are simply no longer willing to tolerate a cycle of control, manipulation, and distortion. And that is what they cannot accept. So, what happens when you refuse to engage? When you stay firm? When you do not rise to the bait? When you continue to move forward without looking back? The narcissist, realizing they can no longer extract power from you, will either escalate or disengage. Some will double down, trying to provoke you in new ways, perhaps by attacking your character more aggressively or by attempting to turn more people against you. Others, recognizing that their tactics are no longer effective, will simply move on to a new target. And that in itself reveals everything you need to know. A person who truly cared about you, who truly valued your presence in their life, would not seek to harm you the moment they lost control. They would not feel the need to smear your name, to rewrite history, to cast themselves as the victim in order to justify their behavior. That is not love, that is not respect, that is control masquerading as attachment. So when you see this happening, when you watch a narcissist shift into victim mode, understand what it really means. It means you've won. It means you are free. Because a person who truly has power does not need to manipulate others into believing they are weak. The greatest revenge against a narcissist is not anger. It is not fighting back. It is not proving them wrong. The greatest revenge is living well, unbothered, unbroken, and uninterested in their illusions. Because the moment you stop playing their game, they lose, and they know it. When a narcissist realizes they can no longer control you, they often resort to one of their most destructive tactics, provocation. This is not random. It is a calculated attempt to pull you back into the cycle of emotional dependency and reactionary engagement. Because for a narcissist, control is not just about direct domination. It is about keeping you emotionally tethered to them, whether through fear, anger, or guilt. And if they can no longer manipulate you with charm or self-pity, they will provoke you into responding. Now, what does provocation look like in this context? It can manifest in several ways, each designed to elicit an emotional response. Sometimes they will insult you directly or indirectly, poking at your insecurities, attacking your character, or belittling your accomplishment. Other times, they will attempt to humiliate you publicly, making subtle but cutting remarks in front of others, ensuring that you feel the weight of their disapproval. And then there are the more insidious tactics, the gaslighting, the rewriting of history, the sudden accusations meant to make you doubt your own perceptions. But why? Why would someone go to such lengths to antagonize you when you've already made it clear that you are no longer willing to be controlled? The answer lies in the way narcissists perceive power. Unlike a well-adjusted individual who sees relationships as mutual and reciprocal, a narcissist sees them as hierarchical. They must be on top. They must dictate the terms. And when they realize they can no longer do so, they are faced with an intolerable reality, the loss of control. That loss is not merely frustrating to them, it is existentially threatening. Because in their mind, if they are not in control, they are weak. And weakness is unacceptable. So when they provoke you, they are not merely lashing out in frustration. They are attempting to reestablish the dynamic. If they can make you react, if they can make you angry, defensive, or distressed, then in a way, they have won. You may believe you are standing up for yourself, setting the record straight, or simply refusing to take their abuse, but in their mind, the fact that you are reacting at all means they still have influence over you. You are still engaged in the battle. And as long as you are engaged, they are still relevant. This is a crucial point to understand because it changes the way you approach these situations. The instinct, when provoked, is to fight back, to defend your integrity, to assert the truth, to prove them wrong. And while that instinct is natural, it is also exactly what they want. Because every minute you spend explaining yourself to a narcissist is a minute you are not spending moving forward. Every ounce of energy you devote to countering their falsehoods is energy they have successfully extracted from you. So what is the alternative? The alternative is not to fight, but to refuse the fight altogether, not in weakness, but in strength. Because true power does not need to prove itself. When a narcissist tries to provoke you, the most powerful response is no response at all. Not indifference in the sense of resignation, but indifference in the sense of detachment. You see, their words, their actions, their attempts to get under your skin only have power if you grant them significance. This does not mean you should tolerate mistreatment. Setting boundaries is essential. If they are directly harming you, distancing yourself or enforcing consequences is absolutely necessary. But what it does mean is that their emotional provocations, their attempts to make you react, should be met with a level of self-control that renders them ineffective. You do not explain yourself. You do not argue. You do not defend against baseless accusation. You simply let them reveal themselves, because in the end, a narcissist who cannot provoke you is a narcissist who has lost their power. Now, this is easier said than done. Walking away from a provocation requires immense discipline, especially when the attacks feel personal. But here's the reality. When you refuse to engage, you force the narcissist to face something they cannot tolerate, their inability to move you, to make you react, to pull you back into their orbit is the ultimate confirmation that they no longer have control. And nothing is more infuriating to them than realizing that they have become powerless in your eyes. At this stage, one of two things will happen. Either they will escalate, becoming more extreme, more reckless, more desperate in their attempts to provoke you, or they will give up and move on. Both outcomes serve the same purpose. They confirm that you are free, because once a narcissist realizes they can no longer extract emotional energy from you, they are left with no choice but to seek a new source. And that is where the real victory lies. Because the moment you stop reacting, the moment you stop justifying, the moment you stop giving them what they crave, you reclaim your power. And nothing terrifies a narcissist more than someone who has learned to exist beyond their reach. When a narcissist realizes they can no longer control you, one of the most striking things they will do is attempt to rewrite history. This is not a trivial or accidental act. It is an intentional, desperate effort to regain dominance over your perception of reality. Because for a narcissist, control is not just about manipulating your actions in the present. It is about shaping the entire narrative of your relationship, of your identity, even of your past. If they can distort your sense of history, they can still exert influence over how you see yourself and the choices you make moving forward. You see, memory is not merely a static record of events. It is a foundation upon which we build our understanding of ourselves and our relationships. And a narcissist understands, whether consciously or unconsciously, that if they can get you to doubt your own recollection, if they can convince you that your experiences were different than you remember, then they can make you second-guess your decisions. They can make you wonder if you were too harsh, too sensitive, too unreasonable in standing your ground. So how do they go about this rewriting of history? One of the most common tactics is outright denial. They will tell you with absolute certainty that what you remember happening never actually happened. If you recall an argument where they said something cruel, they will insist they never said it. If you recall a betrayal, they will tell you that you're imagining things, that your emotions have distorted the truth. And if you press them, if you insist that you remember clearly, they will become indignant, framing themselves as the victim of your false accusations, of your paranoia. If outright denial does not work, they shift to distortion. They will take fragments of the truth and twist them into something unrecognizable. Maybe you remember them yelling at you in a moment of rage, but now they tell you they were only raising their voice because you were the one being unreasonable. Maybe you recall them withdrawing affection as a form of punishment, but now they tell you they were simply giving you space because they cared so much. They will reinterpret past events in a way that justifies their actions and vilifies yours. And then there is the most insidious tactic of all, reframing the entire relationship. They will claim that they were always the one trying to make things work, that they endured so much because of your flaws, your instability, your inability to see how much they cared. If they can convince you that you were the problem all along, then they can make you feel guilty for leaving, for setting boundaries, for asserting yourself. They will paint themselves as the selfless martyr and you as the irrational aggressor, hoping that this distortion will be enough to pull you back into their control. But here is the fundamental truth. You are not obligated to participate in their revisionist history. You do not need their permission to trust your own experiences. One of the greatest acts of defiance against a narcissist is to hold firm in your truth, to refuse to let them dictate how you interpret your own life. And this is not merely about remembering past conflicts accurately. It is about recognizing that your perception is valid, that your emotions are legitimate, that your choices to protect yourself were necessary. This is where many people falter. Because when someone insists over and over that your recollection is wrong, that your emotions are misguided, that your entire perspective is flawed, it is deeply unsettling. It can make you question yourself, even when you know better. And this is what the narcissist is counting on. They are counting on your self-doubt, on your empathy, on your willingness to see the best in others. even at the expense of your own reality. But here's the thing. Truth does not require validation from those who seek to manipulate it. You do not need their agreement to know what happened. You do not need their approval to hold on to what you know is real. The moment you stop seeking confirmation from them, the moment you stop engaging in their attempts to distort the past, is the moment you truly break free. Because once you see through the pattern, once you recognize that their attempts to rewrite history are not about truth, but about control, you gain an immense power, the power of unwavering clarity. And clarity is the one thing a narcissist cannot stand, because clarity makes you untouchable. It makes you immune to their gaslighting, their distortions, their manipulations. So when they try to rewrite the past, when they try to convince you that things were different than you remember, do not argue, do not plead your case, do not waste your energy trying to get them to admit the truth. Simply recognize what they are doing and refuse to play the game. The truth does not need their permission to exist, and neither do you. When a narcissist realizes they can no longer control you, their final move is often the most telling. At this stage, their tactics shift from manipulation and distortion to something more primitive, destruction. If they cannot own you, if they cannot dictate your perception, if they cannot make you doubt yourself, then they will attempt to dismantle the very foundation of your life. And they will do this not necessarily out of conscious malice, though sometimes it is, but out of sheer desperation. Because to them, losing control over you is akin to losing control over themselves. This destruction can manifest in different ways, but one of the most common is an assault on your reputation. Narcissists are deeply concerned with perception, how others see them, how they are understood by the world. And when you stop playing along with their version of reality, when you reject their control, you become a threat. And in their mind, threats must be neutralized. They will spread lies, twist facts, and create narratives designed to make you seem unstable, cruel, ungrateful, or even dangerous. They will attempt to turn mutual friends against you, to position themselves as the victim, to ensure that they remain in control of the story, even if they have lost control of you. And this is particularly effective because most people don't look too deeply into the dynamics of relationships. If someone appears hurt, if someone insists they have been wronged, the natural response of many is to believe them. Narcissists are often skilled performers in this regard, able to shed tears on command, to weave tragic tales that paint them as the innocent party. And so you may find yourself in a position where the people around you begin to look at you differently, where you hear whispers of things that were said, where you realize that the smear campaign against you has begun. And this is where many people stumble, because the urge to defend yourself, to correct the record, to explain what really happened, it can be overwhelming. You want people to understand the truth. You want them to see through the manipulation. But here's the harsh reality. Engaging in that fight is exactly what the narcissist wants. Because as long as you are responding, as long as you are trying to counter their lies, you are still caught in their web. You are still playing the game. And the more you fight, the more you feed into the narrative that they have created, that you are unstable, reactive. So what do you do instead? You let them burn themselves out. You allow them to reveal themselves over time because the truth has a way of surfacing. People who thrive on manipulation, who constantly need to control and distort reality, cannot maintain that facade forever. The cracks begin to show. Patterns emerge. Those who blindly believe them now will either wake up to the truth or continue to serve as enablers. But either way, you will be free. Another way they attempt destruction is through personal sabotage. If they still have access to any part of your life, your work, your finances, your social circles, they may use that access to create problems for you. Maybe they try to discredit you professionally, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of colleagues. Maybe they interfere with your personal relationships, feeding misinformation to those closest to you. Maybe they even attempt to drag you back into legal battles, custody disputes, anything that will drain your time, your